Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. 20 years ago, some 8,000 Bosnian Muslims were killed at the hands of Bosnian Serb forces in the town of Srebrenica. This has been described as an act of genocide by international courts. At the time, Srebrenica was under the protection of both NATO and the United Nations, with Dutch UN peacekeepers on the ground. Ever since, the Dutch authorities have been accused and even sued in court for failing to prevent the massacre. But as the world commemorates the 20th anniversary of this summer episode, new information has surfaced accusing the United States, Great Britain and France to have reached a secret deal without telling its key ally, foremost, the Netherlands. The explosive claims are made first and foremost by our guest, a man who was deeply involved in the issue at the time as Netherlands. Joris Verhoeven joins us via satellite from The Hague. He's the author of a book published in Dutch. I would translate the title of the book as Safe Area Failures and Successes in Protecting Civilians in War. It's published by Atlas Contact Publisher. Mr. Verhoeven, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
So you had debts for many years, especially trying to answer a question: why did NATO not respond to several requests for airstrikes from the Dutch peacekeepers in Srebrenica? They saw the Bosnian Serb leaders under the command of Ratko Mladic were zeroing in on Srebrenica. Now you think you know the answer to that question. Tell us about it.
Yes, what was promised to the Dutch troops was significant close air support to be given within 2 hours after a Serb attack. That promise was made by the United Nations Secretary General Boutros Ghali in January 1994. When the Serb attack started in the beginning of July 1995, the Dutch commander of the UN troops in Srebrenica asked for close air support, even 9 times. And it was also promised to me. But nothing arrived till it was too late. And what arrived was much too little. And I found that behind this is an agreement between the 3 governments of United Kingdom, France and United States not to use airstrikes anymore. It reads literally to suspend the use of airstrikes against the Bosnian Serb military because they thought it had counterproductive effects.
However, this was an agreement reached in late May that is described in some declassified archives from the United States between President Jacques Chirac of France, Bill Clinton of the United States, British Prime Minister John Major. But the main issue is that the Dutch government, you yourself, were not told about this secret agreement.
Indeed, I think as the Netherlands was the 3rd troop contributing country and had taken on the responsibility for the UN task in Srebrenica, the most vulnerable spot in eastern Bosnia, the 3 allies should have discussed their intention to suspend the use of air power with the Netherlands government. We were kept in the dark.
Why do you think the Netherlands, who, as you said, has a strong presence on the ground, is a member of NATO, a close ally of those 3 countries, why do you think you were not told about this key agreement? Because obviously your troops were on the ground and in clear danger.
They were in no position to be able to defend Srebrenica on the ground with territorial defense. Air support was essential. Now, why was the Netherlands not informed about this decision? I think smaller countries are not always high on the list of priorities of the larger countries. Secondly, France and Great Britain had suffered the humiliation of UN blue helmets of their nationality having been taken hostage by General Mladic. So they were thinking, first of all, of their own military. So I think it was a combination of confusion, also lack of leadership at that time in the UN operation, and an underestimation of the evil nature of Ratko Mladic and his sub-commanders.
We'll get to the intentions of Mladic and his troops, but I want to go back to this. Don't you feel today, 20 years later, that you were in some way betrayed by your key allies? They didn't tell you about a crucial decision that was made and that concerned your troops directly.
I don't want to use the word betray. I think our position was neglected. Had we been informed about the intention to suspend the use of air power, we certainly would have acted and pointed out to our allies the extremely vulnerable and untenable position of the Dutch blue helmets in Srebrenica. It was possible to defend the eastern enclaves with air power because that was done later on to help save Gorazde, and that worked. Now, had this policy to use air power significantly been applied 6 weeks earlier, that would have made a difference of about 8,000 lives.
I want to get now to the intentions of the Bosnian Serbs. It seems that some of the great powers had intelligence that clearly pointed to the intentions of the Bosnian Serb troops, basically around that time, a month or month and a half before the fall of Srebrenica and the 8,000 lives that were taken. However, again, it seems that this key intelligence was not shared with the Netherlands.
That's right. There were two allies and members of the Security Council who had good intelligence about the Bosnian Serbs and Serb intentions. And I have seen the intelligence. I'm not allowed to disclose from which countries or who were the sources. That they had been informed by the Bosnian Serbs, we are going to take the eastern enclaves in the next 3 weeks. And that information was there at the end of May. I don't know whether this information reached the policymakers. I've seen the documentation from intelligence services. But I don't know whether this was fed to higher levels. Anyway,
But Mr. Verhoeven, you didn't see it at the time. This was not shared with the Dutch, right? Correct?
Exactly, exactly. This information was given to me unofficially by one of the intelligence officers of the countries concerned, who sympathized with the Netherlands for having gotten the blame for the fall of Srebrenica, and unjustly so, because this information had never been shared with us, and it was received in The Hague after the conquest of Srebrenica by the Bosnian Serbs.
So you are not willing to cite the countries, but it would seem that if my guess is the United States and the United Kingdom, I'm not far from the answer.
I'm in no position to confirm anything. It concerned two allies of the Netherlands, and I think that was a lack of sharing of essential intelligence.
Just the last point. Do you believe that, as some have suspected, that in the end, those two key decisions that were not shared with your government and yourself were due to the fact that there were negotiations between Western powers and the Serbian leader, Milosevic, to basically find a peaceful solution, redraw the map that eventually led to the Dayton Accords a few months after the fall of Srebrenica?
I do not think there is any evidence of a deal or an agreement to give up Srebrenica. That would be new to me. We do know that after the fall of Srebrenica, Gorazde was strongly defended, as should have been Srebrenica, and then later that year the Dayton Peace Agreement was reached. I do think that it was a collective failure of many governments to avoid the fall of Srebrenica.
Do you feel bitter today to have seen for 20 years basically the Dutch and the UN as the main culprits in the eyes of the public opinion worldwide?
No, the culprits, those who are guilty, are the Bosnian Serbs. We should be very clear about this. The question is, could countries have done more to help save the people of Srebrenica? The fall of Srebrenica was blamed on Dutchbat, but actually they could not prevent it. Dutchbat had only 150 lightly armed infantrymen to face an attacking force of 1,500 Bosnian Serbs with tanks and heavy equipment. So a fight for Srebrenica was hopeless. What mattered was timely application of air power.
Mr. Joris Verhoeven, thank you very much for testifying on the tragic fall in Srebrenica 20 years after the facts. Thank you for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.